Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today, I have a exclusive interview with DJ from Virginia. His friend's brother, who is his friend as well, had a encounter so bad that he was out hunting with his crossbow, and he decided to get rid of all his firearms and quit hunting. I also am going to share a couple of encounters that I have just accumulated and sitting on my desk with you guys. Before that, a couple links. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch to help this channel to continue to grow and go. All those links are in the descriptions below. I also have a second channel for creepypasta, fanfiction, and scary voice acting. Stories that, well, they just don't fit on this channel. Now, if that's anything that you're into, follow that link and give those stories a listen. You may just like what you hear. Now, I've taken enough of your time, everybody. Let's get on with tonight's upload. Shall we? Alright, everybody. Today I have DJ back. He's been having problems in Virginia, as we all know. But this incident that he is going to share with us happened to a friend of his brother, also a friend of his, and it's pretty crazy. DJ, how are you?
I'm blessed, Jeff. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you for asking. So, we're down in Virginia, and what occurred?
Well, as you remember me telling you on the last time, my friend's brother come up to there after he'd been hunting. He was all distorted and out of breath and wasn't speaking. Well, since then he's finally lowered the hedge enough to tell us and talk to us what happened. And we're going back to that day. He was down over the hill hunting near a river or a creek in an apple orchard with crossbow. And he was sitting in a tree stand hunting, and the way it's shaped is that the apple orchard is near an open field at the edge of the field, and the sun hits it. But on down the creek there's a big ridge that oversets part of the creek and a shorter ridge, and there's a cliff line there, and the sun never hits this part of the region. It's just usually the way the sun rises and sets. This place never sees daylight. When it snows there, it's what usually melts in a couple days. It takes over a week to 2 weeks to melt because the sun never hits this place. And he was sitting there hunting, and the way he explained it, the deer like to cross from the other side and come across this creek. It's about, he explained, 20 foot across and maybe 2.5 feet deep in the deepest hole there. And he heard something, but instead of, he was suspecting it was deer, it was going slosh, slosh, slosh. The way he explained, the way it would be a human bipedally or somebody in waders crossing. Well, he heard it, and he started listening, and then all of a sudden it stopped. Well, he didn't hear it no more. And he said after a few minutes was looking around, and he said then all of a sudden he started seeing water, like shaking off, like a mist water, like somebody would be beating, a wet chamois on something, knocking the water out after, they'd got done washing their car or something. And he knew that was awful funny. And this was in the dark region of that forest where the sun don't hit. Just, even in the day, it's very dark. And so he watched it there for a few minutes and didn't see nothing. And he turned back around, and then he turned back around and was watching. And he said thought he seen something bouncing in out of the smaller saplings and limbs, coming up the creek, which is southeast toward him, looking, he said it about 3 or 4 foot off the bank, where he could spot or maybe see or pick up something that might have crossed up the trail. He thought, at that time, it might have been a dog, or he didn't even know if he could see what it was anyway. He could just see flashes and images. And he didn't know, if the wind was blowing or what. And then all of a sudden, as it's coming out of that dark part of the forest, he started seeing it. And he said it was on all fours. And he said at that time, he thought it was a dog, but it was really a lot bigger than a dog, so he just assumed it was a bear. And that, little by little, it kept coming closer and closer, and he got a better view and size of it. and he thought it was a bear because the way he explained it, he said the ears weren't straight up. They were like laid back, and he thought it might have been a bear. So he didn't pay no attention to it. And then he's sitting there watching the orchard, and he looks back around, and it comes within 35 to 40 yards, he said, of him. And then he got a good look at it, and he didn't know what it was. And then he's watching it come on out, and then he sees it, and he gets the idea in his head what it is. And anyway, he starts hearing something. He hears a sound. It's the way he explained it sounded sort of like a growl, but muffled because of the way the sound, mixes with the sound of a brook or, a small creek or something. He didn't know what it was. Well, he turned back around again and was watching the other side to make sure no deer would come across. And he closed his eyes for a second, and when he turned back around, this thing is looking at him, standing up looking at him. And he figures out what it is then. And he knows it's growling because he can hear it. It's more profound because he said it moved up about another 10 foot. And then he hears popping, and he's watching. He said it's solid black. He said there's no light pastures or colors or anything mixed with this thing. He said it is the blackest of black he'd ever seen. And then he's seeing the jaws move a little bit up and down. He starts seeing glimmers of white teeth. And then that sound gets louder, not from as much the growling as something like, he described it like popping air bubbles in bubble wrap, where if you get something that's shipped to you. And he started paying closer attention, and it's gnashing its teeth. And by this time, the ears aren't laid back no more, they're straight up. So he knows pretty much what it is. He said he's never, ever felt anything like that in his life. And, the man is 30 years old. And he said he's been scared. He was absolutely positively eat up with fright. I mean, he's never encountered like this, anything in all his years of hunting, and he's been hunting since he was a child, like most of us down in this area. And it was coming a little closer and a little closer. He said it'd take a couple steps and stop, couple steps and stop. But he said then it bowed down, didn't get down on all fours, but sort of benched over. He called it Quasimodo'd. He said it did have a hunch in the back. And it was looking its head up and down and around at him. And he didn't know what to do. And, he said he knew he had a weapon, but the idea of him shooting it just never crossed his mind. He was just worried about survival. And for one moment in time, he said he closed his eyes and was praying. He thought for a second it was a dream. And then, he thought that he may have heard something, and he turned the other direction and kept his eyes closed. And when he turned back around, it was gone. But he said it returned to the dark part of the woods. And as it was going uphill, he said toward the cliffside, toward that bluff that made everything dark in there, he could see parts of it flickering in between trees, and it was back on all fours. He said it was the most silent, quietest thing he'd ever experienced in his life. And the way he put it, if hell and earth had a perfect killing machine of stealth and color and aloofness, this would be it. And he said he sat there for 45 minutes after it was gone, scared to death to move. And when he did, it was about a 10-foot ladder stand. He said he got down on the 2 steps leading from the platform down and just threw the crossbow down in the weeds, and he just jumped and rolled. And then when he got up and caught his consciousness, he just took off running as fast as he could go. And ever since then, he's avoiding, he don't like talking about it, and he won't talk about it unless it's somebody he trusts. And he trusted me and his brother, and it's took since that last show that I told you about for him to finally open up and crack, and that was this week. And since then, he's avoided being outside at dark. If it's 5-10 minutes before the sun's going down and he can't see, he's got a light in his hand and he's heading toward the house. He's even sleeping with a light on in the room where he sleeps, and there's lights all throughout the house. Since then, he had a good collection of firearms. Well, he's liquidated them for the most part, refusing to sell any to anybody, including me and his brother, that know about what happened, saying that would give us an excuse to go hunt it for we would end up going down there getting killed. And he's totally changed his demeanor. He says he don't know if he'll ever hunt again. He's being withdrawn. He's not talking any conversation or anything that has to do with the outdoors or hiking or any and all activity doing with the outdoors and hiking, fish, whatever he alludes, because he says every time he thinks about outside of that door, he sees this creature. He's seen it in his sleep. He's seen it in his dreams, his nightmares. I mean, it's even to the point now he's done said that any and all werewolf movies or anything like and related that he had in a video or, he's got an immense DVD collection. He has already took out of the collection, boxed up, and taped. And he's either said he's going to sell it, donate it, or give it to somebody he knows. I mean, his whole way of life has been changed from a normal, everyday, outdoorsman and sportsman to becoming a recluse and just withdrawing from his family, society altogether, and just remaining in his home and continuing a life as easy, withdrawn, and being no longer a part of society as he can be. I mean, he has boxed himself in as far from anybody as he can. And now he's even talking about putting a 10-foot rail fence, a steel fence, all the way around his house, and even putting motion lights on every one of the posts for every 20 foot. And on top of that, he's even talking about getting an electrical charge box to add to the fence after night. I mean, he has really, really panicked since then. He has changed his life so far from what I can see. I hope not for the rest of his days, but for now, he has really, really become somebody that we didn't know. And he's just a man that he was before now. And all we can do now is just be there for him and pray and hope that, that the normal man that we once knew returns, whether it be slow, fast, mediation over time with help, whatever, as long as he returns to the man that he was as the most that he can be is all we can hope for.
Right.
And just this chance encounter that, a man had a mind like a stone wall, and he would attack a crocodile for a leg of lamb if, his family was starving. I mean, it's just as tough as they come, and he's just a shallow form of this. He's like a 12-year-old now. He's afraid of horror movies with a certain topic or a certain title or a beast in it. He's just withdrawn. And, the man...
Really quick, because we're already talking about how it's changed him a couple of times, but did he explain to what it looked like to you?
Yeah, he said it was solid black. He said that it looked like a great big wolf. That's what he thought it was at first, a mistake, and then he thought it was a bear because he said he never anticipated a wolf being as thick as what this was. He said the head was huge, and he said even in the dark, he said he estimated it had black or brown eyes because it was not giving off no glow because it was daytime, even in the dark edge of the woods. He said it stood. He estimated about 7.5 foot, which is bigger than anything that I've seen, right, as far as that goes. And the way he explained the sound that it made, I don't know if the river, the creek right there, and its sound of the water sloshing by had anything to do with it. But he explained it like it sounded like a wolverine and a grizzly bear mixed when it was growling. And I don't know. I've only seen a wolverine stand off the black bear a couple times in nature videos, so I don't know. But yeah, he did explain that. And he said the claws he could see, but as far as he could see, they were solid black, and they gave off like a shimmering glow. So he explained like they had been polished to a fine tee, and it was just solid black. I mean, he gives you as much as he can, and then he withdraws. I mean, it takes 15, 20 minutes just to try to get a description from him, and it's in pieces when you get it.
Now, where he had his location, how far from that area to around your area is it?
25, 35 minutes.
Okay. So, two completely different Dogman looking creatures, because, you know, yours was a completely different look to it than this guy saw. So it's, you know, it's a pretty hot spot still, and it doesn't seem like it's dwindling down at all.
I don't know what the future holds for our area around here. I just, 20 years ago, things like this were unheard of.
Right.
You would never thought, being, a bigger game and agriculture county of this part of our area is, that something like this would ever be in its borders. But now it seems like every time you turn around, a chance encounter is just right around the next corner. And it's really becoming sad. I mean, I don't wish no harm upon these things. I've come to accept that they are like us. They're a life form. They're a living, breathing, in some circumstances, if we had to defend ourselves, bleeding organism, whether they're organic life form or whatever life form they may be, they're still a living thing, and I don't wish no harm upon them. But at the same time, I wish never to see one of these things again.
And this really messed him up to the point, like you were sharing. Yes, he became a recluse, but he also got rid of all his firearms as well. He wants no.
Yes.
This one really took it over the top for him. Yes,
it did.
Wow.
He gathered up his collection of weapons, and the way he explains it, he called a auction company, and it was a couple hours away from here. He told them, explained what he had. They met up. He come to his place of residence. He showed them. They took them, and they were going to sell at auction, and, whoever bought them was going to register them, and he was going to get the money for them. I mean, that's how bad. He didn't even encounter selling them, trying to sell them legally and have different patrons take them and register them at the local sport goods shop. He just, one fell swoop, got rid of every one of them at one time. He didn't want nothing to do with them.
Right. Wow. That's crazy.
It's crazy.
Well, that's all we can do is pray for him, and pray that he turns back, and maybe he'll turn this into a learning experience and start doing some research. It's still fresh in his mind, so hopefully in the future he can just turn it and start doing research on these things, and that way he'll be able to understand a little bit better, that, hey, he's just not the only person that saw it. There's a lot more other people that have seen these things, and just find the help that he needs. So, well, DJ, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing this with us. It's always a pleasure having you on.
And I always thank you, Jeff. As I've done told you, you're the stage for anything that comes around that's scripted, that you give them people a fair chance to clear their minds and hopefully start to rebound back in normal everyday society.
Right. Well, if this guy ever decides that he wants to share, let him know that there's a platform that will not interrupt him, and he can share. Also, he can listen, and there's a slew of other people that have had encounters just like his. So
I definitely will.
All right, buddy. Thanks for coming on.
All right, you have a good evening.
You as well. Today's first encounter, Hopkins County, Texas. This person, when she was 17, her boyfriend and a friend were in the White Oak Creek area, just outside of Sulphur Springs. She said they were sitting there and a large shadow crossed the car, and the car began to shake. The friend was sitting in the back of the car, which she described him as being a very tough guy, being approximately 6.5 feet, and not afraid of much. While she and her brother were in the front of the car, they didn't see what was happening, but they turned around and looked at their friend, and he was slumped over crying in the back seat. He wouldn't tell them what he had seen, and she described him as being in shock after the incident occurred. She said they then started the car and sped out of the area. Today's second encounter, Titus County, Texas. I was out in the backyard when I was 9 years old, playing on a rope swing. I heard a loud grunting sound like a large animal running. I turned and looked across the road. There was a very large, dark, furry creature running through the neighbor's pasture towards our land. On our side of the road, there were several hundred acres of woodland that ran up to Lake Tankersley. As the creature reached the barbed wire fence, it just sort of stepped over and never missed a beat. It continued across the road about 40 yards north of me and entered the woods. I could clearly hear branches being broke and the continued huffing as it ran through the woods. Needless to say, it scared the living hell out of me, and I made a beeline for the house. After that, you couldn't get me further than 100 feet from the house at dusk. I did go into the woods the next day, and there were quite a lot of freshly broken branches along the line that matched the creature's path as best as I could tell. Today's third encounter, Veracruz, Mexico. One evening, when we came back to our neighborhood, one of our neighbors told my mom that she lost her baby boy. That was the third tragedy around our colony within a month. I recalled my mom telling my dad that night that she was very scared and wanted us to move as soon as possible. My dad said we would. When she was done talking with my dad, she called my brother and myself in and gave us instructions not to go outside after dark no matter what. About 2 nights later, we were celebrating my brother's birthday, and after the celebration, my mom cleaned the house and put us to sleep. Sometime that night, I woke up to drink water, and I noticed that it was really bright outside the kitchen because the moonlight was very bright coming through the window above the kitchen sink. I was too small to get a cup from the cupboard, so I pulled a chair from our dining room table and put it right in front of the sink. At that moment, I happened to look into the neighbor's house across from our home and noticed that there was someone or something very big in the front of their door, and it seemed to be holding something. It looked like a freaking police dog with bright red eyes on 2 legs, and what it was holding was a baby. I got off the chair, ran to the room to my baby brother's bed, and held him for a long time. I was so scared that I thought whatever I saw was going to come through our door and take us away. The next morning, we went to church, and our neighbor told my parents that her friend across from our home lost her child the night before, and that nobody knew how it had happened. When I heard that, I started crying. My mom asked me what was wrong with me. I told her what I had seen. She told me that we would be moving soon and to never tell anybody what I saw, and I haven't until now. Today's fourth encounter, Caddo Parish, Louisiana. It was late June or early July in, I believe, 1979. I was invited to stay with former neighbors and their nephew on their farm. They just had a house put on their farm, and their nephew was visiting from Dallas for a couple of weeks. I thought it was great that I was going to get to spend some time on my neighbor's farm for a couple of weeks. I loved hunting, fishing, and roaming the woods. The farm consisted of about 80 acres of woods, surrounded the entire area with a couple of ponds and 2 abandoned homes, shacks in the woods. An electric barbed wire fence surrounded the farm to keep the cows in, and their yard was also surrounded by a 2-foot-high electric fence to keep them away from the house. It was pretty hot at that time of year, and they didn't have their air conditioners working yet. So we went to sleep with the windows open. The neighbor's nephew and I were sleeping in the same room in twin beds, with windows behind and a little to the side of each bed. At around 2 or 3 in the morning, the nephew and I were awakened by a deep, loud, raspy breathing just outside of the window. It continued for at least 3 to 5 minutes, but at the time seemed like an eternity. I believed that the uninvited visitor was watching me sleep. This was the most terrifying moment of my life, still to this day. I was paralyzed with fear and didn't want to move or breathe. I managed to force myself to slowly inch my way to the side of the bed away from the window. I didn't want the intruder to notice me moving. Once I was on the side of the bed, I was trapped by the sheets. The missus always tucked the sheets in neatly and tightly at the feet and the sides of the bed. I did my best not to move my head and breathe as shallow as I possibly could, as I was too scared to move. I kept trying to see what it was by looking out the side of my eyes, but I couldn't see anything. I was so terrified that this thing was going to break through the screen. After a few minutes, my body was starting to ache from being so tense. At that point, the mantel clock on the other side of the house chimed and almost gave me a heart attack, but also frightened this thing away. That clock seemed to be so loud, I felt like the clock saved my life. I didn't hear anything, no footsteps or anything else. It was like it just wasn't there anymore. At this time, I asked the nephew what he thought it was. He didn't have any idea. About 30 seconds later, I began to hear the night birds chirping and the neighbor's 6 to 7-month-old German Shepherd crawl out from underneath the house. As soon as I heard regular noises outside, I jumped up and looked out, but I saw nothing. I know nobody was playing a joke because I could hear my old neighbor snoring in the other room. The next morning, the nephew and I briefly discussed the incident, but I could tell he didn't really want to talk about it. This was also the last time I have had contact with him. At that time, I was interested in Bigfoot, but had no idea they were in this part of country. Their house had a wooden framed house, and the windows were at least 5.5 feet off the ground. The dog was a pretty good-sized, hyperactive German Shepherd pup that normally barked at people and chased animals. I know that he was hiding for whatever it was outside. He was chained up outside the window, and the chain was long enough for him to go under the house several feet instead of having a doghouse. If any animal wanted to get him, they could have easily either crawled under the house or just pulled the chain holding him. When he came out from under the house, I could hear his back rubbing upon the bottom of the house. I don't know what it could have been other than a Bigfoot. Also, a side note, I'm a very heavy sleeper, and I snore loud. I've even woken myself up on several occasions. I believe my snoring may have attracted whatever it was that night. Today's fifth encounter, Angelina, Texas. I was hunting rabbits in the winter of '79 with a friend in PV Switch area. We'd been walking the old road east of the Ball Cutoff and had seen nothing. We loaded up in my truck and started riding the roads and shining lights, looking for eye shine or rabbits in the road. We were coming up on a bend in the road. I was shining across the old clear cut when my friend started screaming. I turned to see what he was looking at and saw what looked like a large man. Turning and going into the brush, we left the area as fast as that old truck would go. I pretty much gave up night hunting. Today's sixth encounter. I had something happen to me in high school back around 1990 in West Texas. There's not many trees where I'm from except this 2-acre patch of thick trees right off the main drag. I was with 5 of my other friends at the time, and we were curious about what was in the middle of that area. That we were looking for a place to drink where we didn't have to drive out of town and party with coyotes and rattlesnakes. Anyhow, we pulled into the residential street behind the wooded area and walked in. It was nighttime, not super late or anything, but it was still late enough to be kind of creepy, though. We all walked in single file, with me at the front. We were all talking as we walked in, trying not to act scared. We got far enough in that you could no longer see the car lights nearby through the trees or anything. We stopped for a moment because my girlfriend at the time started to really get scared and didn't want to go any further. When she did this, the other two girls that were with us got freaked out as well and didn't want to move ahead. Me, however, trying to act macho at the time, said I ain't scared and pushed ahead a few yards. Very soon I could no longer see or hear my friends, who should have been still very close. I looked over to my left and noticed a very small clearing, maybe 10 to 15 feet away, I'm guessing. I noticed something that caught my eye. It was white and low to the ground. Have you ever seen something that it's like your brain can't catch up to what you're seeing, so it really doesn't register? As I tried to focus on what it was, after a very brief moment, I realized it was a white goat. Might sound weird, but I had never seen a goat in real life before, so it was unusual to me, not to mention that there are no fences or really anything to keep it where it was. So unusual, I thought. I don't really know how much time elapsed for this whole experience, but in hindsight, it feels like only a few seconds. But about as long as it took my brain to process that I was looking at a goat, I was overcome by fear. This thing turned to look at me, got up on two legs, and came running directly at me. I have never been so overcome with fear in my life. That thing maybe took 8 or 9 steps, and I turned to run back the way I came. No macho, no more. I was screaming to run because a fucking 2-legged goat was chasing me. We hauled ass out of there and never went back. I was so freaked out that I told my parents about it. My dad laughed and said the property owner probably was just messing with the kids that sneak there. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. But I told my dad that whatever it was ran directly at me. I mean, it wasn't dodging trees or anything. It just stood up, maybe 4 to 5 feet tall, and came charging straight at me on 2 legs like a human would, except with goat legs. It's kind of funny thinking about it again, actually. I still don't know exactly what I saw, but it appeared as a 2-legged goat sprinting at me upright through the trees. I've never heard anything like this around here. Also, I never heard anything, no footsteps, no nothing, which is also weird in hindsight. Anyhow, that's my weird ghost story, or goat story from West Texas. Well, there you go, guys. A pretty good, brief interview. I like interviews like that. Just terrifying ones. Actually, I like all interviews. I love having people on and sharing their encounters. Speaking of which, I texted Kumbo today, and maybe, just maybe, I'll be recording an upload with him, maybe tonight or tomorrow. I'm not really sure, but very soon, guys. Also, 6 terrifying encounters. I hope you enjoyed these as much as I enjoyed sharing them with you. Yeah, wow. Just a really crazy bunch of encounters. And I really love encounters like this. I don't know. A subscriber just sent me an amazing encounter that she had as a child. She's sending me her second encounter. I'm hoping to have her and another family member on the show someday to share this, as well as me narrate them. Anyway, guys, I hope you guys had a great night and a good day. And with that, farewell.